Ron is walking here to the lectern. I wanted to share with you just for one moment, building upon, seek ye first God's reign and God's justice. That is a core mission for our church, for any church, but for our church. If we had an annual meeting and all we said is, okay, we're going to seek first God's reign and God's justice, amen, goodbye. Jack wouldn't, people would probably say we hadn't done enough yet, but that would be a focus and great great core mission, vision, value statement that we would have. So building upon that, it is always wonderful when our members can speak about God's reign and God's justice from their own perspective. And that's one of the things that I always appreciate about visiting pastors when they're here, as well as our lay members when they speak, because they are sharing from their own perspective. And a long time ago, in a congregational development seminar that I went to, one of the leaders said, churches where the people share their faith to one another grow. It's not only in number, in spirit, in mind, in heart, but churches that members and persons of part of the congregation share their faith with one another grow. So today's an opportunity in this Black History Month for us to grow as these two persons share a bit of their experience with us as we're all together as a beloved community of faith.
So last Sunday after Willetta inspired me with her discussion of Black history and all the wonderful people in Black history, all the things that they've done for our country, I was inspired. And I spoke to Kevin afterwards, just briefly, about one member of my family who has an unusual name, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Family heritage obviously has a lot to do with how we turn out, who we become in life. I also have to just mention briefly here to start is that friends have an influence on us too. And today I'm lucky to have Bill and Joyce Simpson here with us from Everett, Washington. Bill was my best friend at Franklin Grade School in Peoria, Illinois, and at Peoria High School. His father also was the pastor at the First Presbyterian Church in Peoria, and he baptized me when I was 12 years old. If I hadn't met Bill, that wouldn't have happened. Bill also had another real positive effect on me, or an effect. The reason I have a crooked nose, we played a lot of basketball in the alley behind his house and my house, and he has really sharp elbows. So all my pictures up till when I was about 13 or 14, I had a straight nose. After that, it's crooked. So I asked Bill if he remembered meeting my grandmother, Grace Garden Humphrey, this morning, and he said he didn't quite remember her, but he spent a lot of time with my family. We did different things, but Grace, she was a Garton, and her father was named Lincoln Lovejoy Garton. And that's what I'm going to talk about. First, we need a little bit more about Lincoln Lovejoy Garton's background. His father was John Garton. John and his wife, Asenath Morse, were part of successful farming families around Clinton, Illinois, and DeWitt County. John served in the Illinois Volunteers during the Civil War. He enlisted in 1862, and he was wounded in 1863 and discharged honorably because of his wounds. So John and Asenath lived there in Clinton, Illinois, and their first son they named Lincoln Lovejoy Garton. Well, you might figure out, well, he was born in 1860. Who might have influenced that first name? Well, Abraham Lincoln was that person, and Abraham Lincoln worked in Springfield, Illinois as an attorney, and he traveled around the country with a circuit court judge, and he often came to Clinton, Illinois to work on legal matters, and I'm sure that the Garten family probably engaged him in some legal things. But also Lincoln was very well known at that time, of course, because he was, in 1860, he ran for president. In 1858, he ran for Senate. In 1854, he was involved in creating the Republican Party in Illinois. And my family, the Gartens, did turn out to be Republicans. So he obviously had an influence, and they probably saw him speak at perhaps the Lincoln-Douglas debate, there were 7 of them held in Illinois in 1858, and one of them was in Charleston, Illinois, which was not too far from where my families lived. And my great-great-grandparents, John and Asenath, were married on September 9th, 1858. Guess who came to their reception? Abraham Lincoln. It's recorded in our family history that he was invited to be part of the wedding party. And it's also recorded that he spoke favorably of the marriage. He said, this will be a successful marriage because Asenath cut the cake neither too thick nor too thin. So that explains the Lincoln and Lincoln Lovejoy Garden. So who's Lovejoy? Some of you may have heard of either Owen Lovejoy or Elijah Lovejoy. My great-grandfather, Lincoln Lovejoy Garden, was named after Owen Lovejoy. Owen was an American lawyer, a congregational minister, an abolitionist, a Republican congressman from Illinois. He was also a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Kathy and I visited his home in Princeton, Illinois, next to the Congregational Church, and there was a secret compartment where he could hide fugitive slaves. His brother Elijah, I'm just mentioning this quickly too, that they both were born in Albion, Maine. Warren, Wallace, and so he was originally from Maine. His brother was a Presbyterian minister and an anti-slave editor of the Alton Observer, the abolitionist paper. And Owen actually studied theology there. Owen was present on the night of November 7th, 1837, when his brother Elijah was murdered while trying to defend the printing press of the Illinois Anti-Slavery Society from an angry mob. He was reportedly sworn on his brother's grave to never forsake the cause that had been sprinkled with my brother's blood. So he went on to become a pastor at the Congregational Church in Princeton. He organized a number of anti-slavery congregational churches in Illinois, begun by the American Missionary Association. His activities brought him increasing public prominence. He was elected to a member of the Illinois State Legislature. He worked with Lincoln in creating the Republican Party. He was there with Lincoln in Bloomington, Illinois, on the campus of Illinois Normal University, or college at that time, where Mike and Bill actually are graduates from what's now Illinois State, and heard the famous speech, "House divided cannot stand." So he was present on the stage with the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and I think obviously his notoriety influenced my family, and they decided to name Lincoln Lovejoy Garden, my great-grandfather. So coming down to today, what does that mean to me? Well, this is all fairly new information to me. Since I retired almost 20 years ago, I began working on my genealogy, and I found this family record of the Garden family. And even though I just learned of that history, I have a feeling that somehow, through my grandmother, those values, those ideas of opposing slavery, lifting up the oppressed, came through her from Owen, from Lincoln to me. I feel a responsibility to that family heritage, that that I should be looking to find ways to lift the oppressed. The stain of racism exists on our country. It's something that Lovejoy and Lincoln fought hard to erase. Obviously, it continues to today. So I'm proud of that heritage, and I'm hoping to continue in the footsteps of those giants. Thank you.
Wow. Good morning. I had been asked to explain what inspired my writing and to explain the essence of its meaning. My initial inspiration was actually not what, but who. Colin Kaepernick. I don't know how many of you know who he was or is. A former quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers is the who. The person whose attacks were the seed of my inspiration. I wrote Taking a Knee in response to the angry, vitriolic reaction Colin received for taking a knee as a protest to the modern-day bigotry and racism. Many folks were angered by his taking a knee during the national anthem because they viewed it as disrespectful, especially to our military. At a rally in Alabama, using all the words, Donald Trump called Kaepernick a SOB. Perhaps unlike Kaepernick, those who were angered by his protests were unaware that he took a knee as a sign of respect for the military after he learned from a veteran that in the military, as a sign of respect, soldiers take a knee in front of a fallen brother's grave. Nevertheless, the main purpose for publicly taking a knee was to protest the injustice and wrongdoings he had observed against African Americans and minorities in the United States, as well as the recent treatment of black people at the hands of some of the police. What inspired me most was his courage, persistence, and personal sacrifice. I'm not sure if you're a follower of football, but since he made these protests, he has been unable to get a job in playing football, even though he at one time was a quarterback. However, beyond empathy, I had respect, I had respect for his efforts. It was his action that influenced the title of my piece, Taking a Knee. His experience inspired me to reflect on the historical, provocative content over the centuries that hopefully you will hear and understand what taking a knee reveals. My words are not written for sympathy, but they are a continued call for equality. They are a call for recognition and removal of blinders and rationalization that allows the privileged to deny that they have received advantages or ignore and deny that they have unearned benefits supplied by a bigoted culture. Granted, this is not an easy idea to accomplish. An anonymous quote I've read says, when you are accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. I wrote the piece because it was a way of protesting not only the current concerns affecting African Americans, but our sordid history since the inception of this country, our country. I wrote Taking a Knee because it describes my history, your history, our history. It is Colin Kaepernick's history as well. If we ignore our real history, if we are not outraged about the demeaning pain that was caused by those who falsely convinced themselves that they were a superior race, and therefore privileged to disregard the life experiences of those they consider inferior. And I realize there is a possibility history can repeat itself. In one section of my writing, I included the words black codes. And it wasn't until 3 years ago, when I had the opportunity to visit the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, that I was even made aware of them. I feel they may have been encoded into our American psyche, still influencing our culture. Fortunately, historically, and currently, there were and still are disciples who courageously, who courageously dared to right the wrongs of slavery. What some have named our country's original sin and its discriminatory outgrowth. Their aim, like mine, was to counter the beliefs which have infiltrated and influenced some of the minds of our national culture. However, we can give thanks for the family of Ron Humphrey and so many others who strive to live out the teachings of Jesus. I would like you to join me now in taking a knee. You'll find it in the bulletins. Taken away from Africa and enslaved.
Restore us, O Lord God of hosts. Let thy face shine, that we may be saved.
Determined to no longer be a victim of their evil and allow the Euro colonists and their descendants use my race to make themselves feel superior and to make themselves monetarily richer on the backs of free labor, on the backs of those they call lazy, on the backs of those who toiled in the fields and served in their kitchens to make their lives easier.
Restore us, O Lord God of hosts. Let thy face shine, that we may be saved.
It is only to God that I will bow down on 2 knees. But to the captors I will take only 1 knee, not in submission, but in condemnation and revelation before the world to see and acknowledge their soulless, hypocritical self-reflection of superiority. Whips, lynching trees, congressional laws, rapes, drug distribution, pulpit lies and scriptural distortions, unjust imprisonment, unjust policing, shootings in the back, shootings in the church, bombings in the church, black codes, Jim Crow redlining, assassinations, KKK, white supremacists, racist presidents, friends using the N-word, dishonoring my dignity, job discrimination, housing discrimination, cultural discrimination, and more. You may be tired of me using the race card, but that is the hand I have been dealt. I'm tired of experiencing it. But I won't give up. I won't give in. 2 bended knees for God. 1 defiant knee for injustice so the world can see the inhumanity. Restore us, O Lord God of hosts. Let thy face shine that we may be saved. Psalm 80, verses 14 through 19. Turn again, O God of hosts. Look down from heaven and see. Have regard for this vine, the stalk which thy right hand planted. They have burned it with fire. They have cut it down. May they perish at the rebuke of thy countenance. But let thy hand be upon the man of thy right hand, the Son of Man, whom thou hast made strong for thyself. Then we will never turn back from thee. Give us life, and we will call on thy name.
Restore us, O Lord God of hosts. Let thy face shine, that we may be saved.
Amen. Our next hymn of response is number